From an HR perspective, I think we've fallen into the trap for so long as a function that there's people and their emotions and the humans, and then there's technology. And for some reason, as a function, we have put a ring fence around the human part that we've claimed is ours. And I think the time has come where our function needs to be able to take a positional shift. This is HR's moment. Step forward and be part of the conversation, because nobody has the answers at the moment. So if you're part of the solutioning, that's a very empowering place to be. Well, who I am, I'm still trying to figure out. Hopefully, I'll get there before time runs out. The idea of a career ladder, I'm surprised that idea has lasted as long as it has, or a career path, because I think our world is changing so rapidly that if you become fixated on specific roles, you might be surprised by the time you get there that they don't exist anymore. They look very different and they require different capabilities. So, staying curious, deeply curious, and staying connected to what makes you passionate and your heart sing in your work, for me, has worked well.
First of all, thank you for listening to our EXapps podcast, and apologies that I interrupt this episode. I promise I keep it short, but it's quite important and I need your help, please. I've been publishing these podcast conversations for 2 years now, and I see from the statistics that many of you are listening to my podcast on Spotify or Apple, and some of you are watching on YouTube. Thank you for that, and I hope you enjoyed the episode so far. I plan on making more episodes, but in order to do so, as I'm a one-man show, I would like to ask for your help, please. It doesn't cost you anything except for maybe 1 minute of your time. Please subscribe to my podcast on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to my YouTube channel. With your subscriptions, I will be able to reach more listeners, which in turn helps me get further interesting guests for you to listen to. So if you will, it's a win-win. Subscribe, and if you want, you can also leave a like or a comment, or tell me if there's anyone you want me to speak to in one of my episodes. Thank you so much for your support, and now let's start the next episode. How is AI influencing not only HR, but transforming the whole enterprise? Why is now HR's time to shine and command the table rather than just sitting on it? And how is it HR's inherent destination to widen its scope from just the human workforce to the human and AI workforce? Welcome to another Employee Experience Labs podcast from the Munich Podcast studio. Employee Experience Labs podcasts are about HR tech, employee experience, shared services, and other interesting topics around HR and the workforce. We continue our most successful season so far from the Workbook of an HR leader, where I am talking to experienced colleagues in our field about their daily working routine and what and how they are going about the various challenges they have to face each day. I'm a tireless believer that we can all be better if we learn from each other, but there are not many opportunities to actually do that. Yes, there are conferences, but how often can you attend one in a year? Yes, there are peer-to-peer connections, but how many do you manage to keep running? I'm a firm believer that we can all do a better job if we learn from each other. And so I'm inviting seasoned HR experts from various fields and companies to tell us about their workday and how they go about the challenges of today. For today's episode, I have something special. I was talking to a seasoned HR expert that has not only seen it all, but worked and shaped HR in multiple roles across multiple regions in multinational corporations throughout decades. In her last role, she was the CHRO to Africa's biggest retailer, ShopWide, where she successfully transitioned the company into the age of digital HR. We have, of course, talked about that, but much more. We've talked about her experiences and learnings, but also went deep into the future of our function, especially in the light of technology. Meet Athene van Mazijk. Hello, Athene. It is so great to have you here. I mean, I'm really happy. We know each other for quite some time, but I was really intrigued to get you on my podcast. I'm really happy that we managed it today. How are you?
Oh, Volker, I'm so well. And thank you so much for inviting me as a guest. I'm excited as well. You're right, we've done some great work together and we've got some common experiences that we can relate to. So it's going to be a wonderful opportunity just to reflect on some of those and to share some insights. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I cannot wait. I cannot wait. But Athene, before we go there, I think we owe it to the audience that we do a quick introduction. Tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you? What's your background? What's your experiences? Who are you? Who's Athene?
Well, who I am, I'm still trying to figure out. Hopefully,
Yeah, we are all.
I'll get there before time runs out. But Volker, as you know, I have formed a career largely in HR. I've been very, very fortunate to work across continents, across countries, across different business models, industries. And have had I've had some incredible exposure, some incredible support from amazing leaders in this world. And yeah, so professionally, the work of HR has been my life's work. And, I think we'll talk a little bit about some of my insights there. But
Mm.
first and foremost, I am a mother, I am a wife, and have been very happily married for a long time, 40 years in last
Oh
December.
wow.
And
Amazing. Congratulations.
thank you, and recently retired. So we have taken the leap to retire in Portugal, and we arrived here in October last year. Still settling in. Retirement still
Mm.
feels like an extended holiday. It doesn't really feel like the work of retirement has started. But yeah, I think what's preoccupying me at the moment, as a consequence and as an outcome of all of my life's experiences to date, is the so what of all of those. And
Mm.
our world is changing rapidly. And, we're all on this quest to understand what our purpose is in life. I think most people kind of preoccupy themselves with that question.
Yeah.
And for me, that has intensified as I've retired. So that's um, that's where I am right now, as honest and as vulnerable
That's
as that
amazing.
is. Yeah, thank you.
That is amazing, Athene. And honestly, I think it is, I'm pretty sure it is just currently an extended holiday for you. I don't think. I don't think. I don't want to, I don't want to go into names, but this morning, just by coincidence, I went through LinkedIn and saw a post from some of our former colleagues. They're also in the unretirement stage, and I think you will get there as well very soon.
Yes, whatever format that looks like. Hey.
Mhm. Now, Athene, you have already said you've seen a lot. You've been also
Mm,
across, I think, almost all the continents, right? I think the only one where you didn't work, if I have it right, is Latin America. But
true.
you are originally from South Africa. You have
Correct.
worked in the Middle East. You have worked in North America. You have worked in Europe,
Yeah.
always international companies, international positions. That's a lot. And when you think about all of those experience, which would you say was the most exciting for you personally?
Yeah, an interesting question. I guess, Volker, if I'm truly honest with myself, my career was not a function of forward planning. It was a
Hmm.
function
Hmm.
of, does this opportunity present some new learning, a way for me
Yeah,
to make a contribution? Could I feel purposeful
yeah,
in it? And so
yeah, yeah.
I think if for that reason, I almost have to call out every role that I had. But I think if three really stand out. The first and
Hmm.
probably the most formative would have been a government-based role. South Africa, in
Mm.
a new democracy, just post 92, had decided to implement some principles, one of them being a shared service center. It's a principle, sort of private sector principles, rather, should I say.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And that I was recruited to head up the HR service delivery for the Gauteng province, which was at that stage, and probably still is today, the economic powerhouse, not only of South
Yeah.
Africa, but of the African continent.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
was working in a not-for-profit context was the learning for me there. And the purpose of being able to free up some money so that
Yeah.
the government could deliver services to so
Yeah.
many more of its constituents was an incredible learning lesson. I then, a little later on in my career, had the opportunity to move from a corporate services director to a COO and to a CEO. And although it was a fairly brief stint, it was
Mm.
one in which we managed to grow the company. I felt really good. I felt like I had earned the right to be at the table because I
Mm.
knew what it was like to be the head of an organization,
Yeah.
responsible for the
Yeah.
P&L, responsible for all of
Yeah.
the resources in
Yeah.
the organization. And then I would be remiss in saying the last role that you and I worked in together, the head of the service delivery organization for a huge international retailer, um, was wonderful in that it was the first opportunity we got to really connect HR and technology. And
Mm.
I think that's going to be a big part of the theme of today's conversation. So it stands out for me and invoked quite a deep curiosity about what the world of the future is going to look like and
Mm.
how technology, particularly how technology in human
Will
resources
shape that.
practicing,
Yeah.
will take shape.
Absolutely, Athene, and definitely will deep dive deep into this. There's just one thing that you managed right at the beginning, right, which I think is a good way of thinking as well for the younger listeners who are just in the beginning of their careers, right? Where you basically said like you choose your career steps purposefully to learn, to grow, and to be challenged. And I think this is what I would say is a great advice for our younger colleagues out there in HR. Don't go and search for the next um, career step from a ladder perspective, but go after where you can grow, where you can learn, because this will form yourself and get yourself ready for the next adventure that there is.
You're absolutely right, Volker. And the idea of a career ladder, I'm surprised that idea has lasted as long as it has, or a career path,
Yeah.
because I think our world is changing so rapidly that if you become fixated on specific roles, you might be
Mhm.
surprised by the time you get there that they don't exist anymore. They look
Yes.
very different and they require
Yes.
different capabilities.
Yes.
So, staying curious, deeply curious, and staying connected to what makes you passionate and your heart sing
Yeah.
in your work, for
Yeah.
me, has worked well. I don't want to
Yeah.
presume it's that way for everybody, but it certainly gave me a lot of joy.
And I couldn't agree more. Also because I want to think about myself as doing it very similar. And what I really like about this and is that it touches on two important things. Number one is you will grow yourself through the new challenge, through the new excitement. You will get better and learn more. But also, this curiosity will be seen by superiors, by
Exactly.
colleagues, by peers, and they will want you in exciting opportunities because they know with this
Yeah.
curiosity and this hunger for growth and learning, you will excel at whatever they
Yes,
throw
exactly.
to
Yeah,
you.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Exactly. Now that we can extend that conversation because I think curiosity's got to be partnered with some other attributes for it to translate in successful outcomes or
Yeah.
outcomes that you would define as successful.
Yeah.
But I think it's curiosity in its own right. I always start there because I think it is such an underrated attribute. And
Hmm.
I actually think it's we should be calling it a competence, um,
Yeah.
because it is something that can be learnt, but is something that's also going to be deeply necessary for the future world of work.
I fully agree. I always say, don't hire for, capabilities, for skills, hire
Yeah.
for mindset. Because
Yes,
if you have the right person, they will make it happen.
you're absolutely right. And somebody who headed up an HR function for a long time,
Yeah.
that perspective has worked almost every single time that
Mhm.
we've taken a risky decision, or what we would consider to be a risky decision, because
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody doesn't on paper have the
Yeah.
depth of experience that we would
Mm.
ideally have liked. But
Yeah.
it's a really important topic, and I like to talk about it because I think our youth don't necessarily understand the value of being open minded and not having the solution before
Yes.
really understanding the question.
Absolutely. And you can only understand the question if you ask it and if
Correct.
you go after it. And this is where, unfortunately, I see very often um, colleagues not not willing to be open and ask that question anymore, but being satisfied with the environment they are in.
Yeah,
And that's it always makes me sad because there's so much more out there, and particularly now, and I know we need to turn a bit, but particularly now, our space, HR and technology, as you said, this is this is the most exciting space to be in, and
exactly.
and it is the most exciting also that it ever was. And if you don't ask the questions now, then I guess there's no other time that you will ever be able to ask them, because now it's really
You're so
it's
right.
every morning is different.
Yes, exactly. And our function, HR, has a little bit of a legacy that it comes
Yeah.
with, in terms of the function being satisfied with the status quo. And I don't
Mm.
want, it's so awful to generalize, and I don't advocate for that. But my experience has been more often than not that our function has been the last to challenge the status quo in an organization.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of what's got to change as well, and which is why I'm fixated about this idea of curiosity and being
Yeah.
open minded.
I think it has to change, and um, I think we get there a bit later in our conversation, because with everything that is going on, I always come back to one study. There are multiple, but one point that study made, it's from Harvard. Digital transformations. 80% of the success of digital transformations are depending on the non-technical aspects of it.
Yeah,
The people, the change management, the enablement, the
yeah,
attitude, the mindset. Only 20% of the success is attributable to the actual technology. And who, if not us in HR, are accountable for those 80%? And if we are
exactly.
not today in a digital transformation, I don't know when, right? Today, everything. So we
It's
must
here.
be there.
It's here.
It is here. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think even talking, we're still fortunate that we can talk about our function having the choice to
Yeah.
enable digital transformation, or to
Yeah.
support it, or to accelerate it. But there will come a time very soon where that choice will just not be there anymore, because it will be a
Mm.
given. And then
Yeah.
what role do we play
Yeah.
as a function? So I think we've got to be asking ourselves some hard questions
Mm.
about where we want to position ourselves as a function. Interesting times. Um, I recognize the anxiety that goes with that as well, for individuals, for the function, for the organization, for the world in general.
Mhm.
Um, we have an aging population on the whole. Our population rates are declining. And so that the balance of comfort with newness is going to shift a little bit in the next decade
Yeah.
or two, right? And generally, our youth tend to be early adopters. They tend to be aggressive propagators of new, and in this case, new is technology. Um, Very soon, that's going to be ubiquitous. It will
Yeah.
be what kind of new technology rather than this generic term that we're using at the moment. But there's so much to think about strategically, but also bringing it right down to that human interface, that
Yeah.
interface between humans and machines, and what does
Yeah.
that look like, and how do we get ahead of that? Um, yeah, but as you say, we're going to get there. So let me not
Let's
take us down
let's
a rabbit
let's
hole.
let's let's step back a bit. Exactly.
Yeah,
Ah, um, Athene, you have seen over the years so many different companies and different HR
yeah,
archetypes.
yeah.
Uh, was there one that stood out for you, either positive or negative, that you can call out to say like, hey, this is where I saw something that either worked or just was supposed to work but did not work at all.
Yeah. You know, Falk, I probably need. It's a difficult question to answer, right?
Yeah.
Because I think uh, the the success of an HR model is very often the result of the quality of interpretation of the
Mm.
organizational culture. So
Yeah. Yeah.
understanding what it's time for now in an organization is a
Mm.
part of how you craft your HR service, not just
Mm.
service delivery, not services as we classically know it, but services holistically, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
talent
Yeah.
management,
Yeah.
whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but I think my last role was an interesting one, a
Mm.
hugely successful organization, 160,000 employees, FMCG, retail, so a high consumer interface.
Mm.
And the cultural context here that
Yeah. Yeah.
I think shaped so much, and it's probably underestimated to start with, was
Uh-huh.
the value of relationships.
Mm.
Very, very intimate organization built on a very strong work ethos,
Mhm.
almost a sort of a Calvinistic ethos. And so trying to mechanize, automate,
Yeah.
digitize service
Yeah.
delivery actually was a very slow burn. It was hard
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
to get that established because that human interaction was what created trust in the organization,
Yeah.
not human,
Yeah.
that interaction, the high degree of interaction and intimacy in the
Mhm.
organization is what created a very powerful culture of trust, and
Mm.
therefore delivery, because there was a high degree of loyalty. And the
Mhm.
minute
Mhm.
you try to insert technology into that, it seemed to disrupt that
Mm. You're breaking up something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so, I needed in that role to step back a little bit and to rethink what that needed to look like. And, my successor has continued the work,
Mhm.
but it will be a slower burn because it's in some ways, and this is not about starting later in the cycle, or it's just
Mhm.
that the
Mhm.
cultural context here was
Yeah.
so dependent on looking you in the eyes. And if you say you're going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do something, trusting that it was going to happen, that when
Yeah.
technology became the intermediary or disrupted that, it wobbled the business. And so
Mm.
we had to backtrack
Very interesting.
really
Yeah.
quickly from that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if that's helpful, but certainly
It is, I
here
think.
towards the
Yeah.
end of my career, probably one of the biggest lessons for me.
That is very interesting. But it makes total sense to me, right? Because there is you see this also in other areas, right? But when you think about people, you have a lot of studies around the right CEO for the right point of where the company is. Is it a
Yeah.
startup? Is it a growth? Is it in decline? Does it need restructuring? Right, and every um, person has its own specific attributes to help there, and the same is true when you think about the organization as a whole. You need to respect the attributes of it,
Yeah.
and you can only slowly take one connection out and exchange it with another one. If you do it too fast, the whole puzzle will break down.
Yeah, or you introduce a different conversation about the value proposition,
Yeah.
which I think is the step that I absolutely missed in that process. Because here's the kicker:
Mm.
this organization is very digitally advanced. One of the first
Yeah.
to introduce 60-minute deliveries in the context of Southern Africa.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is doing some incredible stuff, probably even more advanced than the Northern Hemisphere in some way in
Yeah.
retail. But where its people were concerned, there was
Yeah.
a firewall around them.
Mhm.
And
Very interesting.
that was, so understanding your context, I think, is such an important component of designing the right business model, the right archetype, as you call it.
Yeah. And I think that also makes our jobs very safe in the age of AI, because this requires a lot of personal connections, understanding and feeling how the organization is working so that you
Yeah,
can architect the right model for the right time,
yeah,
both now as well as what is the trajectory, where are we going towards.
yeah, yeah, very much so.
Very interesting. Yeah. Athene, two of the core elements that I'm talking most about in my post and podcast is, employee experience and HR technology. I would really love to get your view on both of these. And I know, we've talked about this a lot, but that's like, 5 years ago that we talked about this a lot. So with everything that you have experienced since then, um, how do you define employee experience today?
Hmm. Yeah, you're right. You and I in particular, and our teams, respective teams, have worked hard at trying to understand that so that we could
Mm.
enable it in the
Mhm.
the organizations that we've worked in. But I think, for particularly with the distance of 10 months since being in the
Mhm.
corporate world, in the end, for me, it probably is something as simple as how how I feel about being here,
Mm.
how
Yeah.
how I how this organization makes me feel.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to use that wording because as an individual, I accept the notion that nobody can make you feel anything, but
Yeah.
maybe invites you to feel, or
Yeah.
how it values you. And
Mhm.
the way in which you feel valued is different for so many people. But the
Mm.
bottom line is, how do I feel about being here? I think is
Yeah.
probably at the heart of employee engagement for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It ties back nicely to what we just talked about, right? It is not one thing, but it is the overall cultural,
Yes.
historical, like company historical framework, plus its more um more tactical service offerings and decisions and directions. It's a whole complex thing that needs to work together, and you need to
Right.
be buy into it. And if you buy into it, you probably like it, and you work on the weaker parts or accept the weaker parts. But for the broad concept, you're bought in.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And it starts long before the
Yeah.
actual direct interaction with the organization. When you're thinking
Yeah.
about working there or responding to a job
Yeah.
vacancy. It starts when you first encounter the product, when you first encounter the news
Yeah.
report about about the
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting to watch the reaction to a major electric car manufacturer. I won't name names, but all of yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. It's the reaction. What does that evoke in you? And
Yeah.
does that bring you closer or further away from
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
brand, from the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
you come with all of that predisposition to your first
Mm-hmm.
conversation with the organization, and
Mm.
everything after that then either disproves or proves your assumptions.
Yeah. And very interesting. I'm not sure if you had a chance to listen to it, but I had recently Anil from INOP on. This is how he built his foundational business model on, where he looked into, the problem is not everyone that you hire is actually staying at your company, even if they start to join, but they are leaving, and not necessarily because there is something wrong with the job or there's something wrong with the skills, but because the cultural variance between the individual and the company
Right.
is too high for them to find their home. And I
Yeah.
found this very interesting. So this is basically how we think about um, talent from a management perspective as well as from an acquisition perspective, to not only look into, hey, do you have the right profile to fit this job, but from which companies are you coming from? What kind of
Exactly.
cultural environment do they have? And is this compatible to the current company? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Right? That's very interesting. And this is where AI and technology can really help today. You couldn't do this in the past, but now
You
you
can
can, like,
democratize it. Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
You have
You
this
you have
information and you can push
yeah.
it on it. Yeah.
There are all
That's
sorts
amazing.
of dilemmas associated with that, and data
Mm.
privacy and the morality of so that's a whole other conversation that we need to have.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
what's worrying me at the moment is that we are not even having that conversation because it's imminent, it's here. And so
Mm.
what is our perspective on that? But you're absolutely right. With technology, we'll be able to do in seconds. Um, we'll be able to make an assessment of an individual,
Yeah.
a deeply interpretive assessment. And I know many people will find that offensive and
Yeah.
invasive.
Mhm.
I know many people who are actively extracting themselves from social media so that
Mm. Mm.
the data is not out there and disposable, at the disposal of
Mm. Mm.
good or bad actors in this
Mm.
field.
Mm.
But
Mm.
we need to be thinking about that, because used in a productive way, in a positive way, can be an incredible enabler.
I totally agree, Athene. And that ties me back to another conversation that I had with Roland from the COO of HR for Allianz Insurances,
Right.
where we talked about the we accept shortfalls, biases, etc., from humans, right? And particularly recruiting decisions are uh, a very, one, two, maybe three people take this decision, um, and we live with that. With an AI support, you get way more. Granted, there might be some bias in this as well, but you will always have bias, and the if you really take the right approach, you can get so much more valuable information before you take the decision. And
You're
this is
so
good for
right.
both sides, right? Because
Absolutely.
every the individual that is jumping from one organization to the other, right? This is the most common one. It's not the one that doesn't have a job and starts somewhere new, but you are leaving an organization that you've been for a long time, a safe job, to also have a good salary for your family, everything, and you give all of this up to jump to a new opportunity. And if this is going wrong, the hazard is more on the individual than on the company, honestly. I mean, the
You're
company, yeah, it
absolutely
costs
right.
money,
Yeah.
but so I think it's even in the interest of the individual to have as much information as possible on the table, and that also is about cultural fit. Do I fit into this
Yeah.
organization?
Absolutely right, Volker. And biases are nothing but noise, right? Whether
Yeah,
it's our own bias or bias of somebody else towards me. And the beauty of technology is it allows us to smooth out that perspective. It allows us to normalize the noise. And when you've
yeah.
got so many more sources of insight, and
Yeah.
we can correlate across those. We get a much richer, but we also get a much more accurate picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to your point, that has obvious benefit for the organization, but it also has for the individual, because ultimately the
Mhm.
question that needs to be able to be answered both by the organization and the individual is, can I locate myself productively inside of this strategy or inside of this mission, whatever the organization stands for, is trying to do? And if all of this doesn't lead to being able to answer that
Yeah.
question more accurately,
Yeah.
then it's not helpful. But
Yes.
my view is we're absolutely on that path. It's definitely going to
Yeah.
help us make better quality decisions.
Yeah. And I think we both agree this is the happy path. This is the direction that we want to take. There are definitely the avenues to bring this to the darker side, and we need to be careful, and we must be careful and very explicit about that. But there is an overwhelming opportunity that we cannot just let pass. And connected to this, Athene, and also going back to a conversation or to the beginning of our conversation, I have when we think about HR, and let's be more generic, more holistic, not about specific individuals, but when I think back on HR organizations and technology, then more often than not, that was not a good combination, or not even a combination at all, right? Our HR colleagues are not the ones who are versed or curious or willing to take up the latest and greatest in technology. And I think when we go into no, but today already, this is a must, and you need to get there. How do you see this?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's so I'll start in one place and I'll bring it back again. The partnership between technology and HR, you're right, Volker, is underdeveloped. I think there are
Mhm.
organizations that are doing amazing things, and I don't want to
Mhm.
again generalize, but it's underdeveloped generically across
Mhm.
the globe. Um, but in the future, it's not going to be an HR technology thing, because I think technology is going to be the great democratizer, digitizer of
Mhm. Mhm.
so many
Yeah.
capabilities and functions and
Yeah.
outputs in an
Yeah. Yeah.
organization. HR is just going to be one of them. And so seeing technology as a baseline enabler is is really a mindset shift that I think we need to
Yeah.
get to. Then,
Yeah.
from an HR perspective, I think we've fallen into the trap for so long as a function that there are people and the
Yeah.
emotions and the humans, and
Yeah.
then there's technology. And
Mhm.
for some reason, as a function, we have we have put a ring fence around the human part that we've claimed is ours. And
Yeah.
I I think the time has come where our function needs to be able to take a positional shift, pivot to, how do I use technology to get
Mhm.
better at the human
Mhm.
interface, whether it's between the human
Mhm.
interface and the employee and the consumer, or whether it's the employee and the organization, which is
Mhm.
more
Mhm. Mhm.
employees. So we've got to, and leadership, maybe we've got to figure that out. Um, but I think taking on a perspective that technology right now needs to be our best friend is
Crazy.
critical and urgent, because you kind of started down that path a minute ago, Volker, where if we don't do this, it's going to happen anyway. So
Yeah.
either we're leading that conversation and we're directing it so that the outcomes are productive, or it's
Yeah.
going to overtake us, and then nobody has any control about where
Yes.
this goes to.
Exactly. And I think, I'm by default an optimist. And therefore I think there's the opportunity is so close. We just need to grab it. We just need to be willing to
Yeah.
grab it.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, I think you are right. If we don't grab it, others will do. and you don't know what will the outcome be, because everyone looks at technology from their specific angle. And we are, as you said, in HR, the one to look at everything from the human angle. And we need to have it engraved in technology that there is technology working for and with the human, not the human working for and with the technology,
Right.
which
Exactly.
is a difference. And we
Yeah.
need to shape this now. And this is um and I think we are already anyway talking about AI here, because that is the big one of today, right? This is where I see two big and important avenues, and I would love to get your view on this. When I talk about HR and I always talk about two things that are important from an HR perspective. There is AI for HR. How can we as a function utilize technology to improve our job in service of the employees? Right? This is the whole employee experience topic. This is, development. This is career pathing. This is around all of this, and how we can be a better HR function with technology, with AI. But at the same time, we are coming back to the study that I was citing in the beginning. 80% of the success of the AI transformation of the company, and I think we agree that if a company will not go down that route now, they will be obsolete very soon. There will be very little companies that will survive the next 5, 6, 10 years without going down the route of AI. But to be successful there, we need HR for AI. We need HR colleagues to help facilitate that transformation, to enable our colleagues out there to look at the basics of HR work, to look at org structures, look at culture, look at capabilities, look at ways of working, all of that, right? And if not us, no one will do it.
Yeah.
How do you see this?
You've hit the nail on the head, Volker. I I think this is an incredible opportunity for our function to have not only a seat at the table, but to be a co-creator for the future.
Okay.
And interpreting, it starts with capability. It starts with understanding what those skills are that we're going to need for the future,
Mhm.
and how those skills are going to be able to direct the use of technology. So from a functional perspective, I think we are in that moment where
Mhm,
it
mhm.
should be an assumption that we are
Yeah,
automating whatever can be automated, and we're
yeah, yeah.
enabling the individual employee to help themselves in the most
Mhm.
productive way possible and get out of the way. As a function, we just
Yes.
need to enable and get out of the way.
Get out of the way. Yes.
When it comes to the more strategic influence in the
Mhm.
organization, this is the moment when HR should be elevating that conversation beyond its
Yeah,
own function and to the broader
yeah.
organization, and then beginning to understand the implications for future requirements and how
Mhm.
does that prepare the organization for the future. The customer is going to look different, the employee would look different, some jobs won't exist, some jobs will be new, or roles. The the nature of work will be different. The place of work will be different. Boundaries, borders. I think there's a global fight for protecting borders, and I
Mhm.
think I think we're a long way off of borders dissolving, but we're at the beginning of a phase in our world where borders are
Yeah,
being challenged. Virtual
yeah,
borders, physical, geographic borders, political
yeah,
borders
yeah,
are being
yeah,
challenged. And
yeah,
I think that's going to take us to a very interesting place where talent and skills availability will look very, very differently. So,
yeah,
everything from your
yeah,
learning strategy, tech enabled,
yeah,
AI enabled,
yeah,
all the way
yeah.
through. And imagine an interaction. I need to learn something. I've just finished learning A2 Portuguese. It
Mm.
was one of the hardest things I've done in a long time. But imagine being able to do that with generative AI, where it could
Yeah, yeah,
assess, where am I
yeah,
now? What is the thing that I am worst at? And then,
yeah,
morph the learning interface so it not only meets my personal preferences, but it also
yeah,
addresses the absolute skills gaps that are there,
yeah,
and accelerates that learning path. Because I think the companies that will win in the future are those who can prepare themselves the quickest for the
yeah, yeah,
changes. And you and I both
yes,
know the life cycle of technology is shortening on a daily basis.
mm,
So the
yes,
quicker we learn, the better. So I think two things. The one is definitely the time is almost past when we should be looking at our own function. And for those
hmm,
organizations that haven't, they need to catch up quickly,
yeah,
and then be the bearers of or examples to the organization of what it could look like in order to elevate the conversation to the broader organization, the nature of
yeah,
sales going forward.
yeah,
I don't see an army of a sales force or a sales team
no,
in the future.
yeah,
Um, I see automatic, um, replenishment, because
yeah,
our technology will automatically know whether Costco down the road has got a shelf that is empty or full. So there's some really, really interesting and exciting times ahead that we've got to get in on the conversation.
yes, yes. Exactly, exactly. That no, that's one thing that just sprang to mind when you talked about learning Portuguese. I had and my son as well. He, when was it? I think it was in February or so. He came to me with his iPad and said like, "Hey, um, can I get this game here, please? I tried it. I like it." And I said, "Okay, which game do you want? What was it?" Duolingo. And for those of you who don't know, Duolingo is an app to learn languages. It's not a game,
Languages.
it's an app to
Wow.
learn languages. And how we got there is because this app uses Gen AI to tailor the way of interaction to you. And so for him, it's a game. I was like, fine, I buy you the premium package for the rest of the year. If
Pleasure.
this is what you want to play, I'm fine, right? That's great. But this is how it
Perspectives.
changes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's amazing. Yeah, but coming back, there's one thing, and I couldn't agree more, Athene, with what you said. There's one thing where I am not yet sure what I should think about. I had this conversation with Athena, not Athene, Athena from Hyatt Score, where she is thinking in the future, right? When you think this, what is happening today, further into the future, that particularly also the role of the chief people officer will change towards a chief workforce officer and being accountable not only for the human workers but also for the machine workers. I find this a very interesting perspective. I mean, this again completely widens the field of
Mm.
our practice. I'm not sure if you heard about this before, and if not, if you have any
Yeah.
immediate thoughts that spring to mind when you hear about that. What do you think?
I'm absolutely in that camp. I think broadening
Mm,
the definition of workforce is an absolute necessity. And one of the reasons why I feel very strongly that HR needs to familiarize itself with the value of technology, the value of AI in particular,
yeah,
as quickly
yeah,
as possible, because designing that interface between humans and machines, but then also
yeah,
deploying that
yeah,
holistically in service of the mission of the organization
yeah.
is the work of resource management. And
Mm,
maybe it won't even be, the chief people officer going forward. Maybe it's going to be the chief work officer. I don't know
yeah, yeah,
what that
yeah.
terminology will be, but I'm certainly in that camp. It's an interesting question whether our function will be, and I'm going to be a little bit provocative here,
Mm,
Volker, because I think HR function also often gets a very bad rap, and done well, it can be amazing for an organization. But
yes,
the
yes,
unfortunate bit is there are just too many functions, too many organizations who have not
yeah,
continue to challenge themselves. So the question I
Yeah.
ask myself is, will HR be trusted as the chief workforce
Mhm.
officer of the future?
Yeah.
Will we have
Yeah.
enough skill, a capability to be
Yeah.
able to be truly effective in managing that
Yeah.
interface between humans and machines in service of the organization? I don't know. I'm not clear on that myself. And, as you often say, I don't know how to think about that just yet.
And this is a very good question. And probably we'll see many different pathways that organizations take, some that trust their HR organizations, some that don't. And I wonder where this what leads to, because then, the next function that could take on that work, that ownership, is the core technology function, right? And they have a very different, and this is not right or wrong, but they have a very different model to work and a very different thought process around technology, where it's
Yeah.
more mechanistic rather than human interface based.
Yeah.
So we
And you
probably
could
will
see,
see very different organizations. Yeah.
I agree with you. And I think to a large extent, context again will help define that. But I also see a world in which services in general, internal service delivery,
Hmm.
whether it is accounting, whether it's HR services, whether it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
procurement, I can see a world in which the technology function is made accountable for
Hmm.
the sort of aggregate delivery of all of
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
services, because if that were to be the case, what would need to be true is the organization would need to say it's functional.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just it's not defining, it doesn't advance our
Yeah.
organization's mission to have that work done in any other way than the most efficient,
Yeah.
most accurate
Yeah.
way. And
Yeah.
technology will do that for us. And then the
Yeah.
breaking away of other functions. But it's hard for me to imagine an other HR function that is not enabled by technology at all.
Mm. Mm.
Whatever you're talking about, even culture building,
Yeah.
leadership development, talent
Yeah.
management,
Yeah.
succession
Yeah.
planning, learning,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of it
Yeah. Yeah.
will and should be enabled by technology in a way. So, again, I don't know how to think about that. I think the best that we can do is to stay connected, curious, keep asking those questions, and
Yeah.
pivot as soon as we see
Yeah.
a level of clarity that makes sense for us. Pivot to address
Yeah.
it and take advantage of the opportunity.
And you know what, Athene? All of what you said, plus, and then 5 years from now, you and I will come here back together again to see what we think then. Because then
Yeah,
it will have so much advanced that we can look into it from the retrospective. Right?
wouldn't that be
But
interesting?
that will be interesting. And I'm always, I'm not going there just yet, but I'm always at the end asking, like, how do you think about the HR function in 5 years from now? But
Mm.
I really think about, 5 years. Sorry, that's too far. We can only go 3 years because we didn't even know what is this year, right? If you think about all of AI, we are just in year 3, and it's crazy.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
before going there, now,
Mm.
when we follow down the road that you have just described, that also means that we are. I would interpret it this way, and if you see it different, please
Sure.
share. But I see it in the way that we will then replace human work with machines, with technology to get the work done. And there is a conversation in the ether, if AI will reduce our workforce and will make people unemployed, or if it will be just supportive. My view on this is, and I would love to get your view as well on this then. My view on this is, a company will only be able to afford the technology when it gets more efficient and effective. And that also means reducing in those areas where you are using technology the human workforce. However, at the same time, and you said this in the beginning, the workforce in almost all continents is decreasing. We don't have as many people joining new the workforce than are retiring. So I think those two trends nicely fit. Yes, we will have less people working, but also there will be less people that are looking for work. What would you say? How do you see this?
Yeah, it's there is no doubt in my mind that generative AI is going to do two things. It will change the nature of work,
Mhm.
and by change I mean some some roles will disappear, some jobs will disappear, and others will be created. But on the whole, I think there will be fewer human-habited jobs on the
Mhm.
whole over
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
Um, I you mentioned cost, Volker, and I do think that's something we should probably pause around because there's a
Mm.
cause and effect there that is on my mind. On the one
Yeah.
hand, it's this technology is still fairly prohibitive in terms of cost,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
hard to have the kind of quantum change quickly because of
Yeah.
the investment required, which
Yes.
then
Yes.
results in large scale impact on the organization,
Yeah.
reduction in staff numbers, or whatever. So I think we have a little bit of time, and there's an upward trajectory to that, and at some
Mhm.
point, there will be a sharp upswing because the cost of
Mm.
technology will reduce. It's inevitable, and it'll become
Yes.
more accessible. The
Yeah.
thing that is on my mind, and perhaps this is slightly off brief, but I'm African at heart. Africa is growing in population. It's the one
Yeah.
continent that is
That's
still
true.
growing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it is the least educated.
Mhm.
And it's also the poorest. And so the
Mhm.
availability of the right technology to help Africa accelerate its growth path, I think, is still prohibitive in terms of cost. And we've got this
Mm.
huge unsatisfied youth that are not
Mhm.
skilled enough for the future. And we're not educating them for a future that is enabled to activate a digitally rich work context. So there's so much to think about that really worries me. But if we strip out the regional dynamics and the geographic dynamics, I think you're
Mm.
absolutely right. There will come a point quite quickly, and you and I have known each other for some time, and we worked together last 5 years ago. So if we look back over those 5 years and how much has changed in that time, I think the next 5 years will
Everything has
be
changed.
even more. So,
Yeah.
my expectation is that this um, change curve is absolutely going to go vertical very quickly.
Yeah.
So it's a tummy tucking moment for our
It
function.
is.
Yeah,
It is. But it's also a joyride. Jump in and take it.
absolutely. It can be. I firmly believe this is HR's moment. Step
Yeah.
forward and be part of the conversation because nobody has the answers at the moment. So if you're part of the solutioning, that's a very empowering place to be.
And be the enabler, not the one who is
Yes.
the warrior
Yeah.
and is trying to slow
Yes.
it down. It is
Yes.
inevitable. We need to push it in the right direction, not hold it back. Otherwise, we will
You're
be overtaken.
absolutely right, Volker. Whilst being conscious of the
Mm.
cost factor and
Mm.
the value that it will generate. Because I think there's
Yes,
also the risk that we become so excited about the shiny new toy that we forget
of
to
course.
ask what difference is it
Yes,
going to make, right?
yes,
And we
yes.
can't let go of those basic principles of is it affordable? Will it make enough of a difference? And then how do we make it work for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure if there are any better words to end our conversation. I'm also, conscious, of course, around time. Athene, this was a I have, like, I don't know, 20,000 questions more. And I think we can continue this conversation for another 8 hours.
We could.
Um, but believe it or not, we already have an hour past. It's crazy how time flies. And I want to thank you a lot for your time today, for having this conversation with me. I really enjoyed it, and I think we touched on some very deep topics and gave some very interesting perspectives.
Well, Volker, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Athene.
for trusting me with the conversation. And I found it a very rich and rewarding experience. So I appreciate that very much. And it was so good to spend some time with you again after some years.
It was Athene. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day. Speak soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.